Hey, welcome to Android Dialogues, where we have bite-sized conversations with people in the Android community. I'm Huyen and I'm speaking with...
My name's Alex Lockwood.
And we're currently in Chicago for Chicago Roboto, where both Alex and I were speaking. I'm going to embarrass Alex a little bit because I'm really excited to have him. My last Android job that I kind of got before really going into Android, I remember like being up like totally straight for a week for a release and like not getting any sleep. We had to get a release out, and keeping me company was like Wolfram Rittemeyer's blog and Alex's blog. And I absolutely loved your blogs. Your blog saved my life so many times. So I'm so jazzed to have Alex on the show. And I keep telling him this, and I'm going to keep telling him this until he really gets too embarrassed and won't let me tell the story anymore. But I'm really happy to have you on the show, Alex.
I mean, I like that story. What was it? The loaders?
The loaders, yes. I didn't know how to use them, and it was just like me and Alex's blog posts, like for like 3 days straight. I was actually at a conference, and everyone else was having fun at the conference, and I was in my hotel room. So basically, you kept me company while everyone else had fun, and you kind of gave me like an extra 8 hours of sleep that week. So thank you. But we're not talking about that today. Actually, let me go back a little bit and ask the usual questions. Alex, where are you based, and how did you get started in Android?
Yeah, so I'm based in San Francisco, working at Lyft right now. So I guess I got started with Android kind of, blogging was really the thing that kind of motivated me to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Like going into that loaders blog post, for example, I barely knew anything about loaders, and that was kind of like a theme in my blog posts. Like I'd get curious about something, and then I'd research, a ton about the very specific topic, and then I'd spend all this time writing these really detailed blog posts about that topic. Yeah, I guess that's really kind of how I got into Android.
We're going to talk about something that I have really kind of fallen in love with in the last few months, and that is Shapeshifter. Alex, what is Shapeshifter?
Yeah, so Shapeshifter is basically a web app that helps automate the creation of, well, not necessarily automate, but helps create animated vector drawables for Android. Mm-hmm. And it started out as a tool to help create specifically path morphing animations, but then grew into something bigger, and now you can create animated vector drawables with rotation and translation, and it's kind of meant to be sort of like an Android asset studio for vector drawables.
Which I think is really awesome. And I kind of remember distinctly when Material came out, and you gave two really good examples. And they're kind of like the very Material idea of the play button morphing into the pause and back and forth. And I think you had Timely too. Timely with the morphing time. And I remember when Material came out, and it was really awesome, and we're really excited about motion design and everything. And then about 3 months, I guess after Lollipop came out, and then 3 months later, I remember thinking, all that animation is really, really cool. I don't know how to do that. And we didn't really have components yet, and it's not we didn't have tooling to do that, and now we do with Shapeshifter. And I actually personally for work used it very recently. So how did it start? Because I know you mentioned that there was a blog post that you did, kind of again starting from blog posts.
Yeah, and when Material Design came out, there was this section called Delightful Details, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the hamburger icon changing into the back arrow or something like that. And at the time, also when it came out, I had no idea how to do them, and I was also kind of fascinated by them. So because there's little documentation, and because I was curious about it, that's why I mentioned before, that's usually how I start blog posts.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess I wrote this long kind of blog post about the different techniques for icon animations. And, one is path morphing. You can also, animate transformations, similar to how you would animate the rotation or scale of a view. And you can animate trim paths, you can animate clip paths to hide certain parts of an icon.
Yeah, so doing progress bars and other stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, so that was what got me interested in it. And then, so this blog post I wrote took forever to write.
There was a lot of really good examples in it, I can see why.
Yeah, but I mean also just because I didn't really know JavaScript, and I had to, learn it in order to write that blog post. But the most time-consuming part was the path morphing animations, because in order to make a path morphing animation, you need the start and end state to have the same number of points and the same number of drawing commands. And when a designer exports those shapes for you, they're usually not in that state.
Right.
And you have to figure out how to get them in that state before you can actually animate them. And this was something that not only I suffered with, but also somebody, Nick Butcher from Google, and also Roman Nurik from Google. And for, like a 3 or 4 month period of time, we were kind of just like, I don't know, like telling each other our ideas on like, how could we create something that's like easier and would inspire people to create animated vector drawables. And I guess Shapeshifter was kind of the result that came out of that.
And it seems like there's like a lot of different like iterations you went through to really make, I guess, to make the path morphing kind of like, I guess, better. I guess it's like it was a really, really cool iterative process. Like you started off with like kind of, I guess more kind of like a simple, I guess it's not simple, but like a simple process. And then you like notice different problems and then kind of were iterating on it. Even before I got to Shapeshifter, I tried very, very terribly to do a little path morphing myself. And I found myself seeing some of the things that you showed, like sometimes the like morphing would like kind of become an odd shape and then go to the end state where it just didn't look smooth. Or you were talking about, actually what I really love was like talking about how like kind of like the distance traveled by the points between the start and end shape actually kind of like the shorter it is, the smoother it looks. But then if the points move like through a lot of space, then it starts to look odd and even invert sometimes. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. And I think those are the kind of things that as like someone who normally just codes is really difficult to solve. And it's kind of like you're not quite sure how to do that. And I thought that was really cool how you kind of went through the process of, figuring that out and finding solutions for it. And it really looked like it's working. So if you had a wish list that you could wave a magic wand and that you could get in Shapeshifter like tonight, if like I just was like your fairy godmother and said, okay, boom, you get this in Shapeshifter, what's kind of like your big thing that you want to tackle right now in Shapeshifter?
Yeah, so I guess the number one thing is just having the ability to draw stuff in Shapeshifter, because whenever I show this tool to somebody, I feel like their first natural instinct is like to attempt to draw something on the canvas, and then I have to tell them, oh no, you can't do that. You have to like import the SVG, and then you're kind of stuck with that shape unless you and if you need to modify it, you have to like go into Sketch, re-export the SVG, and then re-import the SVG into Shapeshifter. And the reason why that is just because I guess where Shapeshifter is at now was like never really the intention. Like it initially just started out as a path morphing tool,
right? Yeah.
And a lot of the functionality that exists in Shapeshifter now is from an open source project that Roman Nurik started called Android Icon Animator.
Yeah.
Roman recently had a baby and isn't as active in the open source community. So like he said, oh yeah, you should totally like take over Android Icon Animator. It'd be great if we could like merge the two apps together. And so that's where we're at kind of now. And I think Roman is also kind of like his own worst critic, because I remember talking to him about it, and he was also like bummed that you couldn't draw stuff in Android Icon Animator, but it's just like it's a pretty big undertaking to write that functionality.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because it sounds like you had like kind of like almost like a programming and an engineering problem, right? Like path morphing is difficult to do. And like doing icon animations for Android is difficult to do. So you wrote this tool, but it feels like now, like, I'm just kind of curious, like, you have like the side of it where you're trying to make it efficient, right? You talked about, in your talk about making sure that the actual, like, that it was still an efficient algorithm, right? That didn't take forever, and like balancing, like, oh, if it's a compile time thing, then I can probably accept this level of like, performance, but but I also want the path morphing to look, look good, like look, smooth and look, delightful. But I think it's interesting because I kind of realized the more you're talking, like you've actually kind of gotten into like the tooling side of things and like wanting to write to kind of create something that is, like you said, intuitive and nice to use.
Definitely. And this is also something that was that I've been kind of inspired by Roman Nurik in this way, because Roman Nurik has written all of these web app design tools like Android Asset Studio, and he's written web apps to like visualize like the 3D like layering of like the material design layers of an app.
Yeah, I remember that too.
And Roman's always super, he wants the design of that tool to be perfect, and that's not something you find in a ton of design tools. Like a lot of design tools aren't, ironically, like aren't very like user friendly. Like Adobe After Effects, it has
yes.
it has a ton of functionality, but if you like trying to figure out how to write something extremely simple in that tool is extremely difficult, just because there's so much stuff that's been like piling on over the course of, I guess, years.
But it's almost like UXception. Like you wrote this tool because you're trying to make a delightful UX. And then in the process of writing this tool, you want the tool itself to have really good, UX. And I think that's like a really interesting problem. And almost like, like you're writing a tool and then it's like the focus. I mean, the focus is still there. Like obviously, like kind of like the animation part of it. But like, yeah, like there's like now there's like this other set of problems that you're trying to solve with the tool. And I think that's really cool. You mentioned that it was open source. Like, what can people do? Like, obviously, I feel like I can't be the only one who's absolutely like loves this tool. I know a lot of people do. And you mentioned it was open source. What can people do to kind of like contribute to Shapeshifter? Or what would you like if someone wanted to say, hey, Alex, I want to help with Shapeshifter? What would be like the first place you would send them? Or where around?
Yeah, so like this is also a challenge for me, just because Shapeshifter is obviously like a web tool, right? Like I'm like writing this in AngularJS. Well, not AngularJS, the newer version of Angular. And I'm also not like an expert at web development or anything. I started mainly like a year ago, I guess, right when I started working on this. But yeah, it's been a challenge getting contributors, just because I guess only a fraction of Android developers are also willing to like learn web development. But yeah, I mean, if you're a web developer, I'd love contributions. I think that'd be great. Yeah.
So if you're a full stack Android and if you're full stack in like that, you do Android and web, you should and you like Shapeshifter, you should definitely check it out. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Again, like it's a really great tool, and I think there's a lot to learn. I think from your talk, not just in like I guess. How it works, but also kind of like in this, I think it's a really cool case study of like iterative design and like, you solve one problem and then you find another one and then you solve that. And then it becomes the balance of like, okay, well, performance versus, like the absolute 100% desired perfect result that you want. And I think it's a really fantastic talk, both from just the design, UX, UI kind of like, animated vector drawable side, but also from just kind of like a software development side. So it's a really great talk. Everything is recorded at Chicago Roboto, so we will link it when it comes out. Alex, if people want to find you on the internet, how can they do that?
I guess Twitter at Alex J Lockwood. I guess that's really the main way. Just DM me or something.
Cool. And check out Alex's blogs. I can verify up and down that they're fantastic. And especially like relative into this conversation, the one that you did on, I guess like showing the different ways that you can kind of animate. That was amazing. There's a lot of good examples, and especially for someone who, like for me, for example, I love UI and UX, but obviously I come from an engineering background, so. That stuff is kind of just not stuff that I've picked up. So if you're like me and you love UI and UX and you just kind of want to like, again, expand your knowledge and kind of become more adept and working with that stuff and making your material design more delightful, definitely check it out. But yeah, thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah, no problem.
And thank y'all, and we'll see you next time. Bye.